The iconic scene for me is going into Madison Square Garden. It looked like a menagerie. He came in there. He had on one side Speaker Johnson. He had Joe Rogan. He had Dana White. He had Kid Rock, Hulk Hogan, and Robert F. Kennedy. No one would ever have that assemblage around him, that entourage. So this is all new, and what it really does, and it is deeply offensive to our bicoastal elite as defined by the people who usually run our government. They come out of universities, they come out of the corporate boardroom, they come out of Wall Street, and when they look at this guy and who's around him, the orange hair, the skin, everything, they get repelled by him. They get repelled by his voice, his looks, the people he surrounds himself with, his vocabulary.
Every so often, a figure emerges who doesn't fit the script, who speaks the language the elites pretend doesn't exist, who offends all the right people and refuses to play the game by their rules. And when that figure gains power, the system doesn't argue, it panics. Suddenly, it's not about policies anymore, it's about tone, posture, tweets, and hair. Why? Because the moment he started solving problems, he became dangerous. Not to the country, but to the class that believes only they are entitled to lead it.
He's kind of a classical John Ford hero, a Sophoclean character. He comes in and he says, you don't have the skill sets to solve these problems. I do. I do. And they entrust him to do the unorthodox, and it's crude. And then as he starts to be successful, people start to say, I don't like his tweets. And that's a hallmark of the tragic hero in our fabled Western mythology. We bring these people in, they start to solve the problem, but they do it in an uncouth way because the establishment wouldn't dare use those methodologies. But they work. Joe Biden called these people garbage.
The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization is seen as unconscionable.
There was a sense of that they were the losers and they didn't really know how to deal with the world. And I guess they lacked the culture of the elite and they lacked the romance of the subsidized poor and minorities. They just didn't have anything going for them. And so they were demonized as losers. And Trump said to them, I am your revenge, I suppose. There's no young Obama, no young Bill Clinton that's taking charge and saying, this is who we are. It's AOC or Bernie Sanders, nobody knows, and there's no agenda. And that leaves just a fourth alternative, and that is the reductio ad Hitlerum. Donald Trump is Hitler. He's a fascist. He wore a blue suit at the Vatican. He's gauche. His wife whispered in his ear something. It's every single day to bring him down. And the idea is that we don't have any positive thing, but we're going to make it so chaotic that the American people will get in a fetal position, put their hands over their ears and scream, make it all go away. I can't take it anymore. And we don't care who caused it, but Donald Trump's president. And they're getting emboldened because they see the polls working in their way a little bit.
100 days into the Trump presidency, and we see this, an average of all the different polls you've been seeing out there the last couple of days puts his approval rating at 43%.
The latest CNN poll showing nearly 60% of Americans think Trump's policies have made the U.S. economy worse.
Now, how does Trump stack up that number compared to other presidents at this same point, 100 days in? Well, you can see it's at the bottom.
Foreign policy is pretty good. The biggest issue, of course, is the trade war. And I think that as long as the president had stick to these principles of reciprocity, symmetry, and reducing the $1.2 trillion trade deficit and 50 years of consecutive deficits, he had public support. But there's really only about 7 entities. He talks about 70 people, 90. It's only 7 entities that account for that deficit, and it's mostly the $300 billion from China, the $240 from the EU, South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan, probably $150, $200 billion, and then Canada and Mexico together about $250 billion. And that's about it. But when he goes into another realm, then I think that has hurt him and accounts for some of the poll slippage of 3 or 4 points. When he says he's going to have a blanket tariff and that country in particular is running a deficit with us, and I'm talking now about the UK or Australia to take 2 examples, or Israel, that loses public support. They think, why would you tariff the Brits or the Australians, who are our allies, when we're already running a surplus on trade with those two particular countries. Every once in a while, he gets on this cul-de-sac about revenue. Tariffs account for 2% of American federal income of $5.4 trillion. We only get about 70 to 150, depending on the year, billion. But he says if we get a 15% tariff, we could make $1 trillion or $2 trillion over a decade, but you do the math and it's still only 100 or 200 billion out of 5 trillion. And that doesn't go well with the American people because they bought into it on the idea of fairness, symmetry, reciprocity as a goal to either lower tariffs or eliminate them. But when you divert from that and say you want to see this as a source of revenue, then in the mind of the American, it's sort of price gouging or a quick, it's get-rich scheme, and they don't support it. The polls show that.
Does it hurt your feelings when you see numbers come in that are not what you'd like them to be?
Well, first of all, they're fake polls. And if you take a look at the polls, they interviewed more, and for the most part, they interviewed more Democrats than they did Republicans.
But President Trump doesn't seem bothered by them.
And it's not a pretty thing when you watch. So when you say, am I bothered by it? If I was, I'd be really helped by the fact that in the election, we won in a landslide. We won the popular vote.
Will Donald Trump in the next 60 days get a big trade deal with either India or Japan or South Korea or Taiwan? And if he does do that, and he gets it down to reciprocity and eliminates some of the deficit, I think you will see some movement by the EU and China. But if he doesn't, and we get into a trade, then these tax cuts, more deregulation, more energy production, $4 or $5 trillion in foreign investment. By the time of the midterms, the economy is going to boom. We've never tried this, really, if you think about it. Tax cuts at the same time of trying to scale down the federal government. I've written a lot about the economy of the ancient world, medieval world. Historically, when that debt gets so high, there's only 2 or 3 remedies, and they're not good. And one of them is to inflate the currency and pay it back, as we saw after World War I, in cheaper dollars on the part of Germany, what they owed. The other thing, unfortunately, is to renounce the debt. We've seen that in Latin America. That won't happen, I don't think. And then the third is kind of the scariest of all, and I've seen some people on the left mention it, where you appropriate private capital and you give them credit. For example, a 401k over a certain amount of money would then be used by the government to pay its obligations, and they would be given Social Security credit in years. They've talked about that. But all of those remedies are nihilistic, and it's the only chance that we have is to grow the economy and have fiscal discipline and then pay back, get the interest down. What's killing us right now is that we tripled the national debt, but when the interest was 2%, the actual cost to us was no more than the debt was about 10 or 15 trillion. But when you get up to 5 to 6% on treasury bills and things like that, in some cases short term, it's killing us at 3 billion. And everybody knows it.
Maybe it's not that people don't see his flaws, they see them clearly. But they also see something else. Someone willing to punch back, break the script, and challenge a system that's failed them for decades. When the only alternatives are silence, chaos, or surrender, is it really so surprising they'd rather gamble on someone who fights? The question isn't whether he's perfect, it's whether he's the only one willing to do what no one else will. And I think he's proven to all that he would always rather fight.